So, my goal in revenue performance consulting and with the podcast is to talk about our revenue blunders and how we fixed it, to normalize talking about money so it's not uncomfortable. So, I wanted to ask you, Annie, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it? Welcome to Inspiration Contagion, where we spread inspiration one story at a time. I am your host, Holly Jean Jackson. Each interview spotlights transformational business leaders, their stories, challenges, and advice for how you too can lead yourself and others through inspiration. Learn how you too can achieve peak performance, build more revenue, and lead the legacy you were meant to lead. Welcome back to Inspiration Contagion. This week I have a special episode, our first special episode as of late. And for today, we've got some leaders, they inspire, others innovate, but Annie Yatch, she transforms. From the Defense Intelligence Agency to coaching elite entrepreneurs, Annie has mastered the art of rewiring subconscious patterns that silently cap success. She works with businesses of all sizes, from startups to billion-dollar giants, helping leaders avoid costly mistakes, build high-performing teams, and unlock their full potential. Get ready for a conversation that will challenge the way you think about leadership, performance, and transformation. With that, welcome, Annie Yatch.
Thank you so much for having me, Holly. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, me too. And boy, it's been a week, but we still remain inspirational leaders. So I'm going to kick it off with my favorite question. Annie, what makes you an inspirational leader, or what would you say is your secret sauce?
Oh, wow. The secret sauce to being an inspirational leader. I would say it all goes back to mindset, which I'm sure everybody would say, right? But if you don't have the right mental space internally, you're not going to create the right reality externally. So that's what I'm always focused on. I'm like, how can I get better internally? How can I get better with my relationship with myself?
And can you share with our audience perhaps a story around what being better internally means to you?
Well, the way I look at it is I always think about emotional mastery, because in life there are so many ways and things that can throw us off course, right? We can be triggered by something and we can make a bad decision in business. We can have an emotional reaction and hire the wrong person, right? There's so many things that our emotions really take over on unless and until we do the work. And so for me, it was always about, how can I get myself to a neutral place before I make a decision? How can I make sure that an emotional trigger doesn't affect how I work in business or how I work with my kids or how I show up for friends? So that's really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about emotional mastery.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Boy, if we applied this to the business world, the dating world, that would be a totally different conversation. Wouldn't the world be a better place? It's so funny. I have conversations with people, whether it's networking, on dates, in business, about doing the work. And the people who are doing the work understand what that means. The people that don't look at you kind of like with this really confused look. And you know that they're internally not making choices from a neutral place. Am I right?
That is very true. I mean, neutrality is really the key to almost everything. And if we can look at ourselves from that third party observer, like say we're watching ourselves on a stage, we watch a situation play out, we don't have to have that knee jerk emotional response. We can actually observe ourselves and be like, hey, I wonder why I'm doing this. Could I be curious instead of reactive?
Yep. Oh my goodness. That is such a great reminder. I've had a week where I've gotten to practice a lot of neutrality as life has thrown me all kinds of curveballs, and I've been handling like a boss, not being too triggered. I'm like, okay, cool. Let's go to the next thing.
I like to always say to myself, I'm like, I'm so excited for the surprises that the universe is going to throw at me today, because it just makes it a little bit easier to handle it all, right?
I like that. I'm going to adopt that after this
It
week.
really
I
works.
like
I
that.
always say to myself too at the beginning of each day, because as women, sometimes we feel like we're behind already when we start. I always say to myself, all of the important things will get done today. Because if they weren't important, then they're not going to get done. But all of the important things will get done.
I love that. Yes, that's a great mantra. Okay, well, I want to ask you, what does inspiration mean to Annie?
Gosh, inspiration. I've been thinking about this a lot because I have a lot of female clients and male clients that I work with. And they constantly, what I've found is that a lot of people have very little inspiration in their day-to-day life. And so I just did this with a client where we had discovered that her entire environment for where she worked was just devoid of all inspiration. There was no color. There was no, like, she didn't have any flowers. She basically had a big orange M sign that she thought was horrible and she hates the color orange. And so what I realized for me is that inspiration really comes in like little moments of acknowledgement of other people. Like I'll send out texts in the morning to a bunch of people that I care about because I know at some point those texts will come back and it'll be fulfilling for them like it's fulfilling for me. And that's a level of inspiration. I always like to have fresh flowers out in my house because I look at flowers and I think they're so beautiful. And I'm like, well, that's an inspiration. Or even sometimes some incredible art. You know, if you have like a beautiful art piece, it can inspire you to take action. And then I also, I mean, I know this sounds strange, but I'm really big into Rumi, who's a poet. And that poetry just inspires me, especially around like, you know, when you think about relationships and being connected. I just like to be inspired by beautiful relationships. So,
I love that. And that's a great reminder. I love how all of our guests answer these questions so differently because we're all so unique. And yeah, man, it's amazing how simple things can infuse inspiration in each of our lives. And it's different for each of us, right? So my house, the more wise I get with what works for me, it becomes more and more colorful, more and more filled with plants, more and more filled with art and things from travel destinations that, you know, inspire me. And it's funny because I think people think of inspiration as this kind of far in the distant, I have to build this massive legacy, this big thing based on probably the compare and despair of our society. But inspiration can be really small things. It could also be as simple as showing up as the best version of a parent in your household as possible. So thanks for those gentle reminders.
yeah, simplicity is where it's at, especially with
Yes.
all the hustle and bustle and chaos of the world.
Oh, amen to that. I'm so glad that it's a Friday as we record this. I'm ready to turn things off for a little bit and unplug a little bit.
I hear
Well, let's switch gears to peak performance.
you.
Annie, how do you define peak performance today? And how did you arrive at this definition?
So I had a mentor about 10 years ago say to me, what allows you to be in excellence? And I remember that question, and I've thought about it almost every day since, because unless we know what allows us to be in excellence, and that goes back to almost thinking about what's my ideal day like, and what do I want that day to look and feel like? Too often we get stuck in these ongoing to-do lists and we're not really present. And so I thought about, well, what do I need for excellence? And so I looked at my whole day and I prepped the whole day for that. And what I realized is it's sometimes very simple things, but I call them emotional deposits. So if I'm going to wake up in the morning, I need snuggle time with my boys. I need to get up and make a great breakfast. I have to do a workout typically. And then I like to do my reach outs. I do like 10 acknowledgements of people that I love in my life. So you never know when you're going to get one. So stay tuned, Holly, you're going to get one. But I do
Can't
10
wait.
acknowledgements. And then after that, I'm sort of in the day. But what I realized when I was, gosh, maybe 2 years ago after I went through my divorce, was I really love the sound of tap dancing shoes on a kitchen tile. Now, do I tap dance? Absolutely not. Have I ever tap danced? Have I been trained? No. But I bought myself some tap dancing shoes. And in between my calls, I tap dance to like big musical numbers in my kitchen. And my children actually think I'm good at this. They're like, Mom, you're so good at this. And I'm like, I know, right? It just gives me so much joy. And that's like another level of inspiration. And it goes back to peak performance because if I'm not in joy and I am not in love with my life to a certain degree, I can't be in excellence for other people. And so I found that there's a lot of this emotional deposit that has to happen throughout the day, not just first thing in the morning, but throughout the day so that I get that dopamine hit, I get that piece of joy, and then I'm in higher levels of performance for myself and others.
Oh man. First of all, now I want to see a video of you tap dancing in the
I have had
kitchen.
so many requests. Everyone's got to video that. I'm like, oh my God, I probably should. Although
You
Michael,
should. Can you imagine how great that would be for your marketing? Like about loving your life and having those emotional deposits and just having like a little tap dance video in the background. Oh my gosh. And when you send the love note, I expect to get that emotional deposit of you tap dancing in the kitchen.
God,
No
you'll use
pressure.
email later.
I won't. I won't. It's funny you bring that up because I was playing a game with my family last weekend And it's kind of cool. You put out like 5 phrases or 5 things that, and they're supposed to guess what you love the most in the order of priority or what you don't love, right? So it's basically ranking 5 categories. And for me, one of them was the topics that came up was solo dances. And my family got it wrong. It was like number 2. Like the first one was like outdoor adventures. The second one was solo dances. They're like, really? You have solo dance parties? I'm like, are you kidding me? My dog knows what a solo dance party and knows how to join in. Come
It's
on.
really the best. We do dance parties with my kids too in the mornings. They love it.
See, and that's the thing. I love the idea of these emotional deposits because, like you just said, if we're not in joy and in love in our life, then what are we doing? And
But
it's not hard to do it, you know?
it's not, but we spend so much time, I think, being told what we're supposed to do and being conditioned to act a certain way. And I mean, I was just talking to a client this morning. She was telling me how she doesn't want to post anything on social media because she's like, isn't that like bragging? I'm like, or it's you being relatable and you being interesting and you having a cool life that people want to know about, you know? And it's just so funny to hear that we condition ourselves out of those emotional deposits and into what we think we should be doing, but that never puts us in peak performance or in our own excellence. So it takes some time to discover what those things are for each of us.
Yeah, yeah, and it's interesting too. We did this email and blog about it's like we called it "Have You Lost Your Mojo?" And it's how business owners, similar to what you're describing with these emotional deposits, fall out of love with their business, and
They
it's because they get stuck in what we call in compare and despair. But additionally, they're taking on too much that's not in their zone of genius, or as you would say, in their excellence, and they're not outsourcing those things that are outside of that scope. And so, of course, they don't love it because it's become tedious and it's more of a job than a joy, right?
Very, very
Yeah.
true. I mean, I feel for business owners because, you know, so many of them get so stuck in the hustle and the grind that they forget or they don't plan at the beginning. They don't really think about, well, what's my greater vision here that I want to create? It's more about this is a means to an end. This is a vehicle to get me somewhere, but you can still have a great time on the ride with the vehicle that you choose.
And if you're not having a great time and loving the ride that you've
And we
created
got
for your
some issues.
business, what
Then we
is
got
what's the point? Yeah. All right. Well, so obviously along the way to excellence and peak performance, I'm sure you've had some challenges and obstacles. What were a few of those big ones that you can share with our audience today?
wow. I mean, I've had 3 businesses over the past 15 years. And I mean, the biggest obstacle is you're always trying to pivot and make sure you're staying current with what the client wants. But gosh, I remember we had a 10,000 square foot facility that we had to sell. That was a big defensive fighting fitness and firearms location. And we ran 40 classes a month out of it, but we had to sell that. We had to create a curriculum in leadership for kids. And then the funny part that came up with this is like we had this curriculum for 5th graders, and the head of 3M had seen this curriculum from his 5th grade student, and he called us and he was like, you know, I really want you to come in and teach this to my executive team. And I remember at the time my business partner and I were like, you want us to teach a 5th grader's curriculum to your executive team? At that time, we were like, oh my God, this is going to be a totally different pivot. How are we going to do this? Right. So I think it's anytime you're offered something as a business person and you're not sure if you should take that leap because it throws you off of the main mission a little bit, because there are so many distractions in business, right? There are constant shiny objects. And so we really had to get clear on what is the main like purpose that we're focusing on in order to dial in the filter for how are we making our decisions. And so I would say some of the biggest obstacles we've come up against in business, or I've come up against in business, came from we're doing it this way, but all of a sudden there's this other opportunity. How do we decide if this is a good use of our time or not? And so we really had to make clear what is this filter through which we make our decisions.
Oh my goodness, yes. And that's one of the biggest, most important pieces is there are tons of shiny objects, whether they're external, they come from marketers, they come from people that say they have the silver bullet. By the way, they don't. You guys have
Nobody
this.
has a silver bullet. Nobody has it.
Stop chasing the silver bullet and thinking that it'll magically just go to your door. It doesn't. You can throw as much money at it. It doesn't work that way.
No matter what, you still have to make it applicable to your business. You still have to train the person. Even if you're hiring someone that you think is going to solve everything, you still have to train them and develop them and work with them. It's a whole thing.
Oh yeah, 100%. And that's why I have in my LinkedIn profile turning shiny objects into revenue. But it's also filtering the right shiny object and, Annie and I have worked together in different capacities. That's also why our company for our clients has created what we call our life and business compass. And for us, that's how we train and help our clients have the correct filter based on what their priorities are, which is so unique for each of us, and their 3 quarterly business goals and their long-term legacy goal with their company. Because when you have that information and you choose to filter everything through that lens, you say yes to the right things and
Makes it
no
a
to the
lot
wrong ones.
easier. Makes it
Yeah.
easier. Thank goodness you're doing that. I tell you, like that is one of the biggest problems I come up against with all entrepreneurs.
Yeah, and it's so funny. I think maybe once or twice early days I onboarded a client or two and we didn't do that and we always come back to needing that bad boy. So now we just start
Oh,
there. Yeah.
yep. Always.
So, Annie, you have some really lovely lessons around achieving peak performance. How have you transposed that or translated that to creating a culture of peak performance in your companies?
Gosh, creating peak performance in companies was unique, right? Because there are three big gaps in companies from what I've seen and across the board in business. And what I always tried to do is I tried to fill those leadership gaps. And so, if do you want me to share what those leadership gaps are? It might be helpful for the
Yes.
audience.
Yes.
So, what I've found is that almost every company has three main leadership gaps, no matter the size. If you're $1 million company, a $500,000 company, or a $1.2 billion company. So, the three gaps typically, the first one is always around delegation. Nobody has a template for how we delegate, and most people do it very poorly. And so, having a template for how you delegate and pass and hold responsibility is really key. The second gap is always around feedback. How do I give and receive feedback in a way that keeps somebody super productive instead of in shutdown defensive mode? And then the last one is around planning. Most entrepreneurs, they think that the way they plan is common sense, but it really isn't. It's part of their genius. And most entrepreneurs are incredible at contingency planning. They never teach that to their team. So the team is always coming back to them asking for more support and more help in contingency planning instead of having that entrepreneur teach that skill to the entire team at large. So with those three gaps, you can't scale and grow unless you've already addressed those three major leadership pieces. Um, so that's typically what I find in companies. And for me, being able to, work on the corporate culture, at least the culture in our company, is we had specific templates for each one of those things. But I think that the biggest thing that we did for our company that changed the game was we found a company out there that calms the nervous system of everybody. So it makes you more clear, gets rid of brain fog, helps you sleep deeper, and it really helps you be more present in your filtration process for what you decide to do versus what you don't. And so when we brought that technology to our company, that's when we really started churning and burning at a whole different level.
Wow, that sounds like there is a magic solution out there.
Well, it's the closest I've found to getting people out of their own way when it comes to fight or flight, because almost all entrepreneurs are in some level of fight or flight because their nervous systems are so jacked from something in their childhood that told them it's better for me if I control all the chaos. So they always try to control the chaos instead of stepping out of that pattern or program into something new for themselves.
Yeah, no, I believe that 100%. Yeah, those are definitely the leadership gaps. I was taking notes as you were sharing that because I always learn from these conversations too. But delegation, my goodness, a lot of folks hire us because they don't even know how to like one, hire the right person. And then two, they're so uncomfortable because it's their baby to actually do the delegation. And three, they don't like have the SOPs, the standard operating procedures, or the system or tools to actually successfully delegate and set that person up for success.
Mhm.
And then feedback, oh my goodness, especially if you're hiring offshore, there are
Yeah,
so many cultural differences for how do we provide effective communication and feedback both ways, where the person, depending on the country, where maybe they don't feel comfortable giving the feedback, like it's not acceptable in their culture to do that.
right.
Or also, if me as the boss giving feedback to my assistant, for example, maybe in Asia, they might not take that very well, and then they're like really beating themselves up, and that's why we use a lot of tools like Dan Sullivan's Gap in the Gain, so that we're measuring backwards for success versus compare and despair, and giving and empowering our employees to give us feedback where we mess up. And it's so funny, like I have people on my team and they're like, "Oh, I'm not sure about giving." I'm like, "Tell me." And I am always gracious with the feedback because I need to know. And a lot of times they're helping me see my blind spots, and that's why I hired them. You know?
I love that. I mean, when you can give and receive feedback and it's connecting, then the other person grows with you. And then there's so much more, I would say, like authenticity to the working relationship. And that's what we all want. We just want to feel more connected to the people we work with.
Yeah. And what's kind of cool too is I was looking at the three and I was like, am I doing all those? And I'm like, I am. Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Because when we start to see, if we see any like sales cycles slowing or sales cycles taking longer or the pipeline looks too small, I walk the team through, okay, this is where my head's going. I
Yeah.
don't want you freaking out, but this is happening. And here's what we're going to do to course correct now. And here's where you can help. And your ideas are welcome so that we can correct the ship and make sure this grows even faster. And so I kind of just vocalize where I'm at, what I'm thinking in a way that makes sense. Like, obviously, we don't want to like overshare or scare the team, but
Right.
in a way that's supportive of them understanding my thinking. And what's really cool is they've always stepped up to the plate to have even better ideas than I do. And that's the whole point, right?
Well, we want to invite our team members into problem solving too, right? Because most
Mm-hmm.
companies, I think one of their gaps is that they don't invite their team in. They tend to think that they have to be the person figuring everything out, handing the solution to the team. And really, you want your team to hand the solution to you.
Yes, yes. That's the other thing I love when I was in corporate America as well as with my company, and even with my clients sometimes, depending on like the homework we assign in some cases, is asking them to identify the problem and come back with a solution. And maybe they have more than one solution, and then they're looking for guidance on let's brainstorm why this is the right one.
Right.
I prefer my team coming to me with I saw this problem. Here are a couple ideas versus there's a problem. I need you to use the fire hose to put it out.
Yeah. Because we really shouldn't be fire hoses anymore. We don't want to be fighter fighters for business. We really
Nope.
want the team to be trained in how you think and how they now think so that they can find the solutions for sure.
Yeah. I think the coolest moment in business, Annie, and you've probably experienced this too, since you're so good at this and it's what you and your whole team does, is when you have somebody in your team that is almost like a mini Annie. And for me, a mini Holly. I'm like, oh, what an honor. And they're still themselves, but they're taking on like the pieces that you have trained them on and taught them. And they're even sometimes, don't tell this to everybody, doing it better than you would have. You're like, yes.
This is amazing. It's so good. I mean, it just makes you feel so fulfilled. And then you're excited for them too, because they've built a whole different range of skill sets.
100%. 100%. Yeah. Training badasses for the future, y'all. That's what we're doing here. Okay, we're going to pivot to one of my favorite topics. We're going to talk about revenue and money. And what's so ironic to me is I feel like a lot of folks in business, it's almost like money is kind of like sex. Like it's the dirty thing to talk about. So my goal in revenue performance consulting and with the podcast is to talk about our revenue blunders and how we fixed it, to normalize talking about money so it's not uncomfortable. So I wanted to ask you, Annie, when have you left money on the table and what did you do to fix it?
Oh my gosh. Money all the time. I mean, for a fact, like I've gone on podcasts for the last 15 years and I never really had lead magnets. So I wasn't capturing all that. Or I did capture, but just with only one of the businesses versus all three of the businesses, right? That was a big money on the table situation. I think the other piece too is, there's so much more we can do in follow up that we don't necessarily always do. And there are follow on sales and follow on offers we could offer at the end of, a completion of a contract that we don't necessarily offer to the client. Gosh, what else have I done? I was just thinking the other day, I mean, just in general, like, I don't think I ask for referrals even enough. I mean, there are so many small things that we can do more of just to, bring more money onto the table. And I think that thankfully now, Holly, you're helping me with some of that, right? Because we're getting that dialed in, thank God. But it's just funny because I just always assumed like enough revenue would come, enough people would come, but really you have to have systems. You have to have, things that are automated. And the more you have that, the more people can really hear your voice and receive the support and you can impact more. So I think what you're doing for your clients is just incredible. I'm so thankful for you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, it's interesting the areas that you identified. These are classic areas where we've all at some point in our business left money on the table. And I think it would be very entertaining if somebody came on here and said, oh, I've never left money on the table. I think I'd start laughing.
Please. Please.
I'd be like, "Who are you?" And I thought we pre-screened better for this interview because that never happens. We've all done it, right?
All done.
And I would say the biggest thing is when we don't ask for it, but also when we don't follow up and we don't have the systems.
Yeah,
We also tend to make a lot of assumptions around people, just assuming people are going to give us referrals. They don't remember. And all of us are so inundated with marketing now. We have to ask more than we used to in the past.
very true.
And then I think the last thing is so many people think that they're bothering their prospects. They are not. In fact, most of the time when I pick up this really expensive device that we have and hardly ever use and resist talking through, especially in sales, people, when I call them, they're like, "Oh, Holly Jean, it's delightful to hear from you." And these are prospective clients, you guys, and they have nothing but good things to say.
Yeah,
So what if you stepped in and did more follow-up? What if you actually picked up the phone and made more calls? You'd stop leaving money on the table, right?
that's true. I think the key is we just have to do more touch points with connection versus, and automation, obviously, right? But I think that people are so devoid of connection these days that we love hearing from people. We love hearing from prospective clients and even current clients reaching back out to say, hey, who can you think of that might, be supported by some of this education or training? It's great.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And all they say, all you need is like, I think 10 to 100 fans, right? And once you have those, you're set, especially if they're connected in your area of genius with the clients you want to be connected with. So that's all it takes, you guys.
I love it.
Yeah. All right, Annie, I'm going to do a wrap up. But before we do that, is there anything cool in your world that you want to share with our listeners for them to check out today?
Well, I thought I would offer a couple of book suggestions just because for the clients that I work with, everyone tells me these are books that I have to share more with everybody else. So if you're a woman and you're looking to really expand the money that you can make, the revenue that you can generate, the book It's Not Your Money by Tasha Silver is a great one. If you are a man who's looking to create more stability in his relationship with the person that he is dating or married to, one of the greatest books is by David Data, and it's The Way of the Superior Man. And if you're just a man in business and you're trying to figure out what is my subconscious doing to me, how am I getting stuck, there's a great book called Outwitting the Devil by Napoleon Hill. So I figured that those are some really good resources that people can start reading on their own, even if they never have a chance to work with me directly.
I love it. I've heard the one that you recommend for men with relationships. I believe my life
Every
coach has
woman should
recommended
read
that for,
too. Every woman
yeah,
should too.
yeah. I've had life coaches recommend it for the men I was dating, and it was not going well, and they need to step up to the plate. And did they read it? No, they did not. That's why
Well,
I'm still,
if they
yeah,
don't read it, then they're not the right man for you. If they do read it, then
100%.
like, okay, this could be a winner.
There's hope. There's hope. Annie, can you tell our audience about your new lead magnet or gift that is awesome that they need to get today?
Yeah. So one thing that I put together because I had so many couples asking me, Annie, what are these like secret things that you know to tell us or that you could share with us that take us being peak performance head leaders in our, boardroom to being amazing in the bedroom. And so I put together this little, it's I think 7 main comments or statements you can make to your spouse that helps them get on the same page with you really quickly. And then I added in as a little like bonus feature, what is the number one thing you can say to your spouse to reduce all conflict instantaneously? Because that's the biggest thing that all of us are in fear of. We don't want to be in conflict with our spouse or the person we're dating. And I was like, well, why can't we share more of this? The less conflict you have at home, the more growth and scaling you can do in your business.
You guys, if you are listening to this, you'd be foolish because who doesn't want to be great in the boardroom and the bedroom? I do. So I'm going to get that. I'm going to sign up for that because that sounds amazing. And also, who doesn't want to be able to de escalate conflict? That applies everywhere, you guys. Check it
Everywhere.
out. Annie, we're going to wrap up with 2 quick questions.
Okay.
What is the best one piece of advice you would share with others today?
Ooh, one piece of advice I would share with others. I would let people know that you are in charge of your own emotions. It's really important that you don't let somebody else's emotions take over yours. So, as often as you can, look at anybody who's making you upset and be like, oh, isn't this interesting? This is me creating this feeling inside of me. Why am I doing this to myself? Rather than saying, oh, I'm blaming that person or I'm going into a victim state around the other person's emotions. So don't try to control anybody else's emotions. Just look at your own and realize you're creating the space that you're in.
100%. I love that. And then what is the legacy you wish to leave behind?
Wow, that's a good question. The legacy I wish to leave behind. Honestly, I just hope that when people interact with me, they feel like their day is better. And that if I can help them transform one thought, one behavior, one piece of their mindset that was in a place of negativity or victim or less than into a place of, confidence and sustainability and success, that's what I really want to impart the world with. There's so much more that we can do when we take a look at ourselves and reflect and step into this higher calling or higher purpose.
I love that. Oh my goodness. It makes me think about the movie What About Bob? Baby steps to the elevator. Baby steps to confidence.
That's
Baby
right.
steps to
That's the
less
key.
conflict. Yeah.
I mean, baby steps to confidence. Nobody wins confidence in like a huge giant leap. It's always these little baby steps, and we just stack the habits to get to that confidence.
100%. 100%. All right, everyone. If you loved Annie, in the show notes, or if you're watching this on YouTube, the comments below, we will have all of her links, LinkedIn, Instagram, her website, and that free gift she's offering you for the boardroom to the bedroom success and de-escalating conflict. Come on, this is a no-brainer. Grab that. It's amazing. And of course, if you want to reach out to her directly, you have all of her contact information in the show notes. Please do so. She's doing some amazing things in the world. With that, thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you, Holly. Have a great one.
Thanks, you too. To our listeners, we will see you on our next episode. Again, if you found this valuable, please share it and pass it on with someone else so that we can spread inspiration like contagion. Thank you for joining the show today. I hope you were inspired. More importantly, I hope you take action. If the show inspired you, I ask that you subscribe and share it with your network. Let's spread inspiration together today.